Welcome to FolkFear, a place where ancient whispers still echo through forest canopies, where offerings burn long after the gods have gone silent, and where the dead are never truly gone, only waiting beneath the soil. Tonight we journey deep into the forgotten highlands of Vietnam, to a village erased from maps, but not from memory. A place where spirits are not merely honored, but bound. Where ancestral pacts bleed across generations, and where bones are not buried, but worshipped. This is not a ghost story in the ordinary sense. This is a ritual, a curse, a tale of betrayal sealed in silence. In the village of Ban Co, the well doesn't echo back, it whispers. And when it does, it calls only for daughters. You're listening to the bone well of Ban Co. But beware, some stories are not meant to be unearthed.
Ling had never meant to return. The road to Ban Co coiled like a serpent through the northern mountains, narrowing with every turn, as if resisting her arrival. The mist grew thicker the higher she climbed, swallowing her headlights, blurring the path ahead. Locals said the fog here remembered faces, and sometimes resented them. Her parents had died a week ago. A quiet, tragic accident on a road with no name. Their bodies had been found near a ravine with no signs of collision, no skid marks, just two motionless forms slumped in a stalled car, as if they had simply stopped breathing. No witnesses, no explanation. And now, Ling, who had grown up in Da Nang, schooled in Saigon, and fled to Hanoi to forget everything about her family's strange customs, found herself returning to a village she didn't remember ever visiting, yet somehow knew the name of by heart: Ban Co. Her father had always forbidden her to speak it aloud, but now it was the name printed on the envelope the notary handed her, along with a deed, along with a rusted iron key, wrapped in red thread and old yellowing prayer paper. She hadn't opened the key's wrappings yet. Something about the texture of the talisman repulsed her fingers. The village emerged out of the fog with no welcome, just crooked roofs hunched under ancient trees, wooden homes like bones laid bare on the hillsides, and faces, too many faces, watching from shadowed porches, eyes never blinking, expressions unreadable. She drove slowly through the single dirt road, windows shut, resisting the urge to turn around. And then it appeared, the ancestral house. It stood on the village's edge like a sentinel, perched atop moss-covered stone steps, flanked by crumbling stone lion statues with cracked mouths and blind eyes. Its wooden doors were chained shut with a loop of blackened iron, the lock rusted but not broken. Ling stepped out of the car. The air smelled of wet bark and burnt incense, old incense, the kind that had burned down to ash but refused to blow away. She took the first step, then the second. Her hand reached for the red thread-wrapped key. The moment the key touched the lock, something shifted. A creak, a moan from within the house, low and breathless, like a long-held sigh escaping after years of silence. The chain fell loose. The doors opened without her touch. Inside, time had curdled. Dust floated in thick swirls, suspended like frozen breath. Furniture draped in yellowing linen sheets stood like ghosts awaiting her arrival. In the far corner, beneath a low-hanging lantern covered in soot, stood the ancestral altar, elaborate, massive, with carved dragons chasing each other across dark wood. Photos of people she didn't recognize stared back at her, silent, expectant. But it was the name engraved into the wood beneath the central photo that made her heart stop. Chao Ling. Her own name. Not her grandmother, not her mother, just hers. Ling took a step back. The floor creaked in a language she didn't understand. Her hands were trembling when she touched the name. It was fresh, scratched in with something sharp. Not worn by time, not softened by memory, new. "Welcome home," said an old woman. Ling turned so fast she lost her balance. An old woman stood in the doorway, dressed in all black, her mouth curved in a smile too soft to be trusted. Her eyes were milky white, clouded by age or something older. "You have your mother's voice," she said. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" The woman tilted her head. "Everyone here knows you, even the ones who don't have mouths to speak it." "Who are you?" "Just a midwife," she said. "I was there when you were born, when your cord was cut, or rather, when it should have been." She pointed to Ling's neck, and for the first time she noticed it, something cold brushing her skin, a thin, silver cord, coiled tight like a choker, glinting faintly in the low light. She hadn't worn it. She didn't remember putting it on. Her fingers reached up. The cord didn't move. "It's been with you since your first breath," the woman whispered. "Some cords aren't tied. They're remembered." Before Ling could speak, the old woman turned and left. No footsteps, no sound, only silence, and the distant, unmistakable drip of water echoing from somewhere under the altar. That night, the house didn't sleep. Every plank creaked, every window sighed. The walls themselves seemed to breathe. Ling lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan that refused to spin despite the electricity working. Her phone had no service. Her laptop refused to boot. Even the clock on the wall had stopped at 2:27. When the whispers began, she thought it was the wind, but they didn't come from outside. They came from beneath. The floorboards near the altar trembled. She followed the sound barefoot, candle in hand, breath shallow. The flame flickered but held. As she stepped on the woven mat before the altar, the whispers stopped, and then, without warning, the wood split. A crack tore open at her feet, long, jagged, shaped like a hand reaching up. Ling stumbled back, and the whisper came again, this time unmistakably a voice. It said her name, not in malice, not in welcome, but in hunger. Ling. She ran, out of the house, into the fog, down the steps, across the road. But the village was gone. Only mist, only silence, only the echo of a house that had waited too long for her to come back. And beneath it, sealed with nails and prayer paper and time, something had remembered her. Ling didn't sleep. She returned to the house just before sunrise, her limbs trembling from cold and confusion. The mist hadn't lifted, but it had changed, heavier now, tinged with the faint scent of burnt wood and something older, like dried blood on ancient paper. The villagers were nowhere to be seen. No footsteps on the paths, no morning fires, no barking dogs, just silence, as if the whole village had exhaled and refused to breathe again. Inside the house, the crack in the floor was gone. Not sealed, gone. The mat lay flat, the floor unbroken, as though the whisper, the handprint, the voice, none of it had happened. But Ling remembered. The sound of her name, not spoken, but exhaled like a secret the house had been holding in for too long. She touched the silver cord still tied around her neck. It didn't move, didn't stretch. It lay flush against her skin, impossibly smooth, impossibly cold. She tried pulling it, twisting it. Nothing. It wasn't metal, not thread. Something in between. Something alive. Something that didn't want to be touched. She stared at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror, feeling like she was seeing herself for the first time. Her eyes looked older, her skin pale despite the summer heat, and the cord, it didn't reflect light. It seemed to absorb it. That's when she remembered the box. The lawyer had given her more than just the deed and the key. There had been a box, too, small, wooden, locked shut with a rusted clasp shaped like a lotus flower. She hadn't looked inside until now. Ling knelt beside her backpack and slowly pulled the box out. It was heavier than it looked. Carved into the bottom was a series of symbols she couldn't read, like cursive etchings, looping in on themselves like snakes swallowing their tails. The clasp opened without resistance. Inside were three things: a faded photograph, a small jade comb wrapped in silk, and a letter. Ling's breath caught as she unfolded the photo. It was black and white, old but not ancient. 4 people stood in front of this very house, a man and a woman, her parents younger, smiling but stiff, and a girl standing between them. The girl looked no older than 5. She was dressed in white, her hair tied with red thread, her eyes slightly unfocused, almost clouded, and around her neck, the same silver cord. Ling felt a chill crawl up her spine. She turned the photo over, a single date scrawled in red ink. 1998, Mid-Year Festival, Ban Ko. But Ling was born in Da Nang. She'd never been to Ban Ko. Her parents told her so. She had no memory of this place, no memory of that day, no memory of the girl in the photo. Except now, she wasn't so sure it wasn't her. She opened the letter next. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed on thin rice paper, the kind used in temple records. The ink bled at the edges like veins. Ling, if you are reading this, then we are already gone. We tried to keep the truth from you, not out of cruelty, but out of desperation. We thought if we left, if we erased Ban Ko from your life, the cycle would end. But we were wrong. You were born with the cord, just like the others. We had no choice. We had to bind it before the 27th year. Do not trust the villagers. Do not trust the house. And above all, never remove the cord. It is not an ornament. It is not yours. It is a memory. We are sorry. May and Ba. The paper trembled in her hand, not from wind, but from something beneath the floorboards. That slow, deliberate thump, as if something, someone, was moving under her feet. Ling stuffed the items back into the box, slammed it shut, and backed away. She needed answers now. The village library was nothing more than a single room above the old shrine, dusty and ignored. A wooden sign above the door read, Feng Gi Chepto Tien, Ancestral Records. Inside, she was surprised to find someone already there. The same old woman from the night before, still in black, still cloud-eyed, still smiling like she knew the end of a story Ling hadn't even begun to read. You're early, but then again, time never really left you, did it? The woman said without turning around. I'm looking for records on the Chow family. Of course you are. She shuffled toward a wooden cabinet in the corner, unlocked it with a key she wore around her neck, and pulled out a worn leather-bound book. On the spine was the family name, Chow, stamped in gold, now dulled with age. "This one is yours," the old woman said, handing it over. The book was colder than it should have been. Ling opened it, fingers moving slowly over the brittle pages. Names filled the parchment, written in brush calligraphy, precise and reverent. Generations of Chow blood, elders, mothers, sons, daughters. And then she saw it, a series of names, spaced exactly 27 years apart, each one a girl, each name underlined in red, each followed by a word scrawled in small print. Im Lang, silenced. The last name on the list was hers, Chow Ling, born 1998. Status, Im Lang. There were no death dates, no burial records, just silence. Ling looked up at the old woman. "What does this mean?" The woman was already walking away. "Some voices," she whispered, "are meant to be remembered only by the bones." Back at the house, Ling stood before the altar. The same whisper had returned, quieter now, like it knew she could hear it and didn't want to scare her away. She reached up to touch the cord again. It didn't burn this time. It pulsed, once, like a heartbeat. And then she noticed something she hadn't before. One of the photos on the altar had changed. It was the same image, but the girl in it now smiling. Not the soft smile from before. This one was too wide, too sharp, her eyes now fully clouded, her hand pressed to her throat. Ling dropped the frame. The glass cracked. The house exhaled. That night she dreamed of water. She stood at the edge of the altar, only now it was open, the wood gone, the mat gone, only the well beneath, yawning wide and endless. The whispers called her not by name, but by memory. They said, "You wore the cord before. You spoke before you should have. This time, be still." She looked down and saw herself, younger, in white, submerged in the well, hair floating like seaweed, eyes open, clouded, silver cord unraveling like thread into the depths. Ling woke, gasping, the cord around her neck tighter than ever. She couldn't scream. Something had tied her throat shut from within. The next morning, she found something new under her bed, a comb. The same jade comb from the box, only now it was dripping blood. She dropped it, but no wound followed, no cut, no pain, only a whisper, not from the floor, not from the altar, this time from inside her own throat. It said, "You were not supposed to return." The house did not wake with her. It had been awake all along. Lin rose with a dull ache in her chest, as if she'd run miles in her sleep. Her breathing was shallow. The silver cord clung tighter to her neck today, pressing into the soft flesh beneath her chin like a coiled promise. There were faint bruises where it touched, like fingerprints, but too small for human hands. The jade comb still lay on the floor beside her bed. Clean, dry, no blood, no explanation. She didn't touch it. Instead, she walked barefoot across the old timber boards. The house moaned beneath her weight, not with protest, but with recognition, as if each step she took was a remembered footfall from a lifetime ago. In the kitchen, the gas wouldn't light. The faucet groaned but refused to bleed water. The fridge hummed, but its contents were warm. Everything inside the house was mimicking life, but not living, like the whole place was breathing only to watch her. It was watching. She felt it. She knew it. And the whispers were louder today. Not in volume, in presence. They no longer waited for silence to speak. They wanted her to hear. Lynn lit incense at the altar, not out of faith, but fear. 3 sticks, the way her mother had taught her. Never 4. 4 was death. She whispered her parents' names and bowed 3 times. When she looked up, the smoke curled downward, not up toward the ceiling, but spiraling into the floorboards beneath the altar. That's when she noticed the scratches. Barely visible unless you were kneeling right there. Tiny gashes in the wood, as if something had clawed its way up from below. Each one curved, each one shallow, like fingernails dragging against wood in slow, desperate strokes. She ran her palm across the mat. It rippled, not with wind. There was no breeze. The woven reeds moved as if breathing. She pulled it aside. What she found wasn't just floorboards. It was a trapdoor. Old, circular, reinforced with black iron nails driven deep into its edges. Its surface painted in fading yellow talismans, drawn by brush, smeared by time. Symbols she didn't understand, words that pulsed when she looked at them too long, words that seemed to shift beneath her gaze as though they didn't want to be read. In the center of the door was a single iron ring. Lynn hesitated. She should have turned away. She didn't. She reached out, took the ring in her hand, and the whispers screamed. Not from the trap door, from inside her ears. They burst in like wind through shattered windows, flooding her skull with syllables she didn't recognize, words not meant for human tongues. Her vision blurred, her balance faltered. She dropped the ring and fell back, breath ragged. The whispers stopped the moment her hand let go. The silence that followed was worse. Thick, suspicious, like a crowd holding its breath, waiting to see what she'd do next. She scrambled backward, away from the trapdoor, heart hammering. The floor trembled, just once, then settled. She fled to the village square, if it could even be called that. A single well stood there, dry and cracked. Not the one beneath her house. This was decorative, ornamental, a distraction. The village children played nearby, if you could call it play. They moved slowly, aimlessly, their laughter hollow, never reaching their eyes. One of them, a small girl with a shaven head and pale lips, watched Lynn approach. The girl tilted her head, then lifted her hand and pointed directly at her throat. "You're the one," the girl whispered. Lynn froze. "What did you say?" But the girl had already turned and run, vanishing into the mist like she'd never been there. An old man sweeping the temple steps nearby gave Lynn a long look. "You should stay inside when the shadows get long. Some things only walk when the sun is soft." "I'm not afraid," Lynn lied. The man stopped sweeping. "Then you haven't remembered yet." She found her way to the shrine again, hoping the dusty ancestral records might offer some crack in the story, some missing thread she could tug. But the door was locked this time. and no one answered. Instead, a small envelope had been slid under the door, her name written on it, again. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a note. "The well beneath your altar is not for water. It is not for wishes. It is not for you to open, unless you wish to speak to what your ancestors buried alive. Every 27 years, the bones rise thirsty. You are the next cup." Back at the house, she lit more incense, 4 sticks this time. She didn't care. Let death come early if it had to. The trapdoor pulsed beneath the altar. The nails now dripped with black resin. The talismans were curling at the edges, the ink bleeding like veins down the wood. She counted them. 27 nails. 27 years. She pressed her ear to the door. It was cold, but beneath that chill was a sound that made her blood run ice. Breathing. Shallow. Rhythmic. Familiar. Human. And a whisper. Her name. This time it didn't come from inside her mind. This time it came from below. Lynn. She ran again, but not fast enough. The silver cord yanked backward, not with force, but with suggestion. It didn't drag her, but it wanted to. She had to grip the doorway to pull herself free. Whatever was below that altar, it knew her. It owned her, and she was beginning to remember why. That night, she didn't sleep. The dreams came like waves. In one, she stood at the edge of the altar again. The mat burned away. The trap door was open, the well yawning like a mouth hungry for vowels. She looked down. Bones. Thousands of them. White and broken and bound in red thread. All humming, all speaking. A chorus of silenced daughters. At the center, one skull turned upward. Its jaw opened, and her own voice came out. "Come down and remember." Lynn woke to find herself standing in front of the altar, not in bed, not dreaming. The incense had burned down to nothing. The trap door was warm beneath her feet, and in her hand was the iron ring. She had pulled it open. Beneath the trap door, a stone well descended into darkness. Stairs carved into the walls, worn smooth by centuries of feet, if you could call them feet. The air was thick with rot and age, yet beneath it was the scent of lilies, fresh, sweet, and entirely wrong. She didn't go down. Not yet. But the whispers reached up, this time not pleading, they were welcoming. You were the first. You will be the last. The cord remembers. And from deep, deep below, a soft rattle of chains, of bone, of something waking.
Ling didn't tell anyone about the well. Who would she tell? The villagers who watched her like a returning debt? The old woman who spoke in riddles and vanished with mist? The girl who pointed at her throat and whispered curses through milk teeth? No, Banko was not a place for answers. It was a place where truth was buried, beneath floorboards, beneath bone, beneath time. And it had waited 27 years for her return. She didn't remember leaving, but she was beginning to remember why. That morning, she went into the forest, not for peace, but for distance. She needed to be far from the house, the whispers, the well. But the trees offered no comfort. The branches curved overhead like ribs. The undergrowth was silent, no birdsong,
no rustle, no life. Even the wind avoided this place. She followed a narrow dirt path carved between moss-covered stones, unsure of where it led, but guided by a familiar pull. Her silver cord tightened slightly as she walked, as if warning her or drawing her deeper. Then she saw it. A shrine. Ancient. Broken, the roof collapsed, the offering bowls shattered, the incense holder rusted and filled with dead spiders. Yet beneath the ruin was a stone plaque still intact, its inscription faint but legible. Mỗi 27 năm, một lời hứa được nhớ lại. Every 27 years, a promise is remembered. She knelt in front of it, brushing away the dead leaves. Below the inscription were symbols she'd begun to recognize, though she didn't know how. Old Taoist glyphs, curved like wind and water, looping like spirit threads. They weren't meant to be read, they were meant to be felt. And as she stared, the whispers returned, but not from within, from behind her. She turned, the old woman again, clad in black, no shoes. Her feet didn't disturb the leaves. "You remember more each day," the woman said, voice soft as dust. "The well is opening you." Ling's throat was tight. What is this place? A resting site for the unspoken. Unspoken? The woman knelt beside her. Her clouded eyes stared through Ling into something behind her ribs. "You think you're the first? You think this cycle began with you?" Ling didn't answer. The woman smiled. "It always begins with a daughter." She reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Ling hesitated, but accepted. Inside was a scroll, delicate, fragile. She unrolled it carefully. Names, a list long and tightly packed, each one ending in Chao, each paired with a birth year and a year of disappearance, always 18 years apart, always 27 years between girls. The last name was her own, Chao Ling. Born 1998, year of disappearance pending. Ling's voice cracked. What happened to them? They were given. To the well? No, she said calmly. To what lives beneath it. Ling shook her head. Why? Because, the woman said, standing slowly, when the drought came, and the crops failed, and the animals died, the village turned to what listens in silence. Ling stood too. The spirit. The woman smiled. Not a spirit, not quite. Not one born of heaven or earth. Something older, something that sees through blood. And they gave it a girl? They gave it a voice. The first girl spoke to it, listened to it, understood it. Ling's breath caught. And she was Chao? The woman nodded. The first of the line. Ling looked back at the shrine. So the daughters after her were echoes, repetitions, offerings with familiar bones. Ling swallowed. Why always daughters? The woman's voice dropped. Because sons forget, daughters remember. Back in the house, Ling laid the scroll across the altar. She lit incense again, 3 sticks this time. Her hands didn't shake, not anymore. She stared down at the list of names. They were not just ancestors. They were her. Versions, memories, echoes that came before. And now, she was the next in line. But unlike them, she had left once. Why? She went into the hallway and pulled the old trunk from under the stairs. It had been sealed with rope and more talismans. She ripped them off without hesitation. Whatever protections they once offered, if they ever had, were long since broken. Inside were clothes, letters, a broken doll, and a VHS tape, labeled Ling 2003. She didn't have a TV, but the village temple had one, an old one kept for ceremonial footage. She carried it through the fog, her silver cord brushing her throat with every step. The temple was empty, the TV dusty but intact. She found the player, inserted the tape, pressed play. Static. Then footage. Grainy, dim. A child's birthday. A girl, maybe 5 years old, wearing white, standing in front of the ancestral altar. Her parents beside her, stiff, anxious. Candles flickered. Someone sang. The camera zoomed in on the girl, and Ling felt her blood turn to ice. It was her, not like the photo. Her. Same eyes, same smile, same silver cord. The footage jumped. Now the girl is alone, in front of the altar, crying. Not tantrum crying, not fear. Screaming, mouth wide, tears down her face. Her hands gripped her neck. The cord was tightening. The camera stayed fixed. Someone off-screen whispered, "Shh, she mustn't remember." And the screen went black. Ling sat in silence for a long time. The silver cord pressed against her skin. Now she knew. She had been offered once already. She had been pulled toward the well, but somehow, someone pulled her back and wiped it clean. But the cord remained, waiting, always waiting. That night the whispers grew brighter. They no longer felt like voices from below. They came from within. Echoes in her bloodstream, memories she didn't own. Visions. Her mother sobbing outside the altar room. Her father holding the iron ring and refusing to pull. The villagers chanting in the dark, red silk and ash smearing their cheeks. The well open, bones floating. A girl in white, blind-eyed, rising from the water to reach for her. And now that girl was here, in the house, standing in the hallway. Not a vision, a presence. Her eyes were white. Her neck was wrapped in silver. And when she opened her mouth to scream, no sound came, only the sound of rushing water. Ling turned to run, but her feet wouldn't move. The girl stepped forward, held out her hand. In her palm, a strand of hair, red, long, and wrapped in it a tooth. Ling tried to speak, but her voice was not hers anymore. It was an echo of a daughter before her.
Ling no longer tried to explain away the strange. She didn't blame the house, or the village, or even herself. She blamed the silence, because silence was not emptiness here. It was memory. It filled the walls, seeped between the floorboards, hummed beneath her skin like an instrument she didn't remember learning to play. Silence was the language of this place, and now it was the only thing listening. That morning, Ling returned to the trapdoor. She no longer feared it. She feared not knowing. The iron ring was cold in her palm, but it no longer shocked her. The door opened like it had been waiting. The talismans had peeled away in the night, curling like burnt leaves. Beneath them, faint symbols glowed with soft white light, barely visible, like breath on glass. She descended the first few steps, just enough to see the inside. It wasn't a well.
Not really. It was a chamber, circular, stone, lined with walls etched in carvings, and bones. So many bones, laid out in perfect spirals, skulls placed at equidistant intervals, all facing inward, femurs tied in pairs with red twine, vertebrae stacked like prayer towers. Every bone was clean, preserved, arranged with care. But it was the journals that froze her. They sat on a small wooden shelf carved into the far wall, ancient, weathered, wrapped in cloth, labeled, each with a name, each with a year, each one a daughter. Lynn took the closest one and climbed back upstairs. She didn't open it until she was sitting before the altar. She unwrapped the cloth slowly, like peeling back skin. The journal's pages were brittle, ink faded, but the words were sharp. They cut like whispers across glass. Year, 1918. Name, Cha Tiu. Age, 17. The cord tightens earlier this time. I can feel her breath in my throat. She sings to me in my sleep. She says I mustn't speak. She says our voices were never ours, only lent. I heard the well call out, not with words, with memory. She is below, and she is me. If this is my last entry, tell my mother I forgive her. Tell the next girl I'm sorry I couldn't stop it. Ling closed the book with trembling fingers. She unwrapped the second journal. Year, 1945. Name, Chao Mai. Age, 18. I stitched my mouth shut today, with thread from the altar cloth. They won't take my voice if I bury it first. But she still hears me, even in silence. She presses her fingers against the back of my eyes when I sleep. She leaves red prints on the inside of my skull. I think I was her once. I think we all were. Lynn couldn't breathe. The pages blurred. It wasn't just a sacrifice. It was a cycle of remembrance. Not just bodies, voices, souls caught in repetition. Each girl born to remember the pain of the one before. Each girl silenced in a new way. Each girl left behind just enough of herself to warn the next. Ling looked down at her hands. They were covered in dust and ink, but beneath her nail fingers, dried blood. She hadn't scratched herself. Someone else had. That night, she lit a candle and opened every journal. She read until her eyes stung, until the house grew cold, until the shadows began to move in ways they hadn't before. And with every entry, the same pattern emerged. Whispers beginning at age 14, visions by 16, cord tightening by 17, vanishing by 18, and always, always the final entry ended the same way. Silence. Not death, just absence. As the candle burned low, the house began to whisper, not just from below, from within the walls, faint scratching, words in an old dialect, not Vietnamese, not Chinese, older. Her skin crawled as she pressed her ear to the wood. The voices grew clearer. Female, young, familiar. They spoke in unison. She doesn't remember yet. She needs to remember. Only then will the well close again. Ling whispered, "What remember?" The voices paused, then replied, "The silence was your choice. The offering was not." The next morning, she couldn't speak. No sore throat, no pain. Her voice was simply gone. Not hoarse, not damaged. Missing, as if it had been plucked from her lungs during the night and folded away like a piece of cloth. She tried to scream. Nothing. Tried to cry. Silence. The only sound was the wind outside, brushing against the windows like fingernails on porcelain. She raced to the mirror, opened her mouth. Inside, nothing strange. No swelling, no bruising. But something shimmered at the back of her throat. A thread. Silver, tied in a knot she could not reach. She returned to the journals and flipped through the pages, desperate to find answers. One entry caught her eye, from 1972. The voice goes last, the eyes go first, but not the memories. The memories stay, even if the mouth forgets how to carry them. Later that day, a villager came to the house, not the old woman, a younger man, middle-aged, thin, eyes too still. He carried a clay bowl with something inside wrapped in banana leaves. He placed it on the altar without speaking, then looked at Ling. "You were supposed to forget," he said quietly. Ling wrote a single word on her notebook. "Why?" He didn't answer, just stared, then whispered, "Because memory is what keeps her alive." Before Ling could write more, he turned and left. She unwrapped the bowl. Inside, a handful of teeth, all small, all childlike, all filed flat as if prepared for ritual. Her hands shook, the silver cord burned. The floor beneath her feet throbbed like a heartbeat. That night, the well called again, not in her dreams, in her bones. A low hum that echoed in her spine, in the joints of her knees, behind her teeth. She walked to the altar in a trance, opened the trap door, descended. No candle this time. The walls glowed faintly. At the center of the chamber, where once there had been only bones, now there was a body, floating, face up, eyes closed, dressed in white. The silver cord looped around her neck and around Ling's. A single breath escaped its lips. Not air, a sound, a voice that was not hers, but carried her tone. "Give it back." Ling fled, climbed the stairs 2 at a time, slammed the trapdoor shut. The house exhaled, and the journals burst into flame. All of them. No sound, just fire. Ling stood helpless as generations of silence burned before her, their words erased, their voices unremembered. Only ashes remained. Except one thing, left behind on the floor, untouched by flame. A single word, etched into the wood beneath the ashes. "Speak." The ashes lingered for days. They floated in the air, settled in Lin's hair, clung to the window panes like soot with memory. The fire that had devoured the journals hadn't touched the walls or the altar or anything else in the room. Only the pages, only the voices. It was as if someone or something had chosen silence again. But Lin had changed. She was done being quiet. Even without her voice, she would remember, even if it cost her everything. The old woman returned without knocking. She stood in the doorway with an oil lantern, the flame dim but steady. "You were not meant to see them," she said softly. Lin wrote quickly in her notebook. "The journals?" The woman nodded. "They were meant to guide you, but not to awaken you." Lin scrawled, "Awaken me to what?" The old woman stepped further into the house. The air around her grew colder, not from weather, but from history. "To your place in the pact." They sat at the altar. 2 women, one voiceless, one visionless. The house creaked around them. The trapdoor below pulsed, faint and rhythmic. "I was the last to remember," the woman said. "Before your mother fled, before your birth, I broke the cycle, or so I believed." She reached into her robe and pulled a lacquered wooden scroll tube, dark red, sealed with wax. "The village never wanted you to know the truth," she whispered. "They feared what memory would do." Lin took the scroll with careful hands. The wax cracked like bone. Inside, parchment, brittle and yellow, written not in brush, but in blood. Old Vietnamese, older than her schooling. Formal, ceremonial words she struggled to read, but she could feel it. The meaning didn't come from the letters. It came from the weight. Ban Kho's pact, recorded in the year of the great drought. "We, the elders of this mountain, the breath of stone and cloud, do submit this pact to the one below, the unseen, the unspeaking, the watcher in the roots. In return for water when our children are dust, we offer voice. In return for rain when the sky is blind, we offer memory. In return for fruit when the soil bleeds, we offer flesh. Let her drink what we forget. Let her bind what we unbind. Every 27 winters we return her name. Every 27 springs she will bloom again. She must come from the bloodline that first betrayed her. She must be given willingly, and she must not speak the name she once carried. If the chain breaks, the roots will rot. If the silence ends, she will rise, and Ban Kho will drown beneath her shadow." Lin felt nausea twist in her gut. She didn't need the full translation. She understood. It hadn't been a single offering. It had been a bargain, a blood contract between desperate humans and something that should never have been summoned. A mountain spirit bound by ancestral betrayal. A being without form, given shape by ritual. And her family, the Chu bloodline, was the price, because one of them, long ago, had been the first to speak its name, the first to hear it, the first to be heard by it. She flipped the scroll over. A single name was written on the back, not in Vietnamese, not in Chinese, in characters that bled when touched. Tiel. She had seen the name before, in the first journal. The girl who had heard the well, the girl whose bones still floated below, the girl whose face, in dreams, was always Lin's own. Lin scrawled into her notebook with fury. She was the first. The woman nodded slowly. She was never supposed to survive, but she did, and the pact grew hungry. Lin underlined her next word. Me? You are her return, the voice born again, the memory she left behind, the promise reborn. Lin stood, breath shallow. The offering was never meant to stop. They had tried to break the cycle once, her mother, her father, the fleeing, the silence. But the cord remained, because memory can't be unbound, not when it lives in blood. That night, Lin dreamed of drowning, not in water, but in voices. They filled her lungs, pressed against her ribs, whispered through her teeth, each one a girl, each one a memory, and in the center, beneath the waterline, a woman in white, floating, eyes closed, silver cord around her neck. In her hands, a comb made of bone. In her mouth, Lin's voice. She woke choking, not on air, but on words. A single sentence rose up from her throat like vomit, uninvited and heavy with dust. I remember her. Her voice, broken, scratchy, but hers. She hadn't spoken in days. The silver cord pulsed warmly, like it had let her speak, for now. Lin staggered to her feet. There was only one place left to go. She descended the well, all the way, deeper than before, past the bones, past the spiral, past the silence, until she stood before the pool at the bottom. Black water, still as glass. It reflected nothing, but when she whispered, the surface rippled. And then, a girl rose, not swimming, not walking, floating. Hair loose, eyes open, blind and ancient. Her mouth moved. No sound, only motion. But Lin understood her. You are me. Lin stepped forward. I know. You were taken. I remember. You were promised. I was born into a lie. Will you break it? The water stirred. From its center rose a single object. A mirror, cracked, black-framed, dripping with water. Lin looked into the mirror, saw herself, then saw Tiel, then saw all the girls who had come before her, each layered behind her reflection, all voiceless, all waiting. The mirror shimmered, words formed on its surface, not written, etched with blood. To end the pact, speak the name. To speak the name, become the first. To become the first, die remembering. Lin dropped the mirror. It shattered, not loudly, softly, like bones breaking under water. She climbed back up, throat raw, eyes burning. She knew now. Ben Ko had been fed too long, not with flesh, but with memory. And memory had a mouth. That evening, she stood at the altar, the trapdoor below silent once more. She placed the scroll in the flames, watched the pact burn. And in the smoke that rose, she saw something strange, her mother's face, and her father's, and behind them, the girl, always the girl, not haunting, watching, waiting, for her to finish what they never could.
The village changed overnight. Lin felt it the moment she opened her eyes. The air was thicker, sweeter somehow, like rotting fruit masked by jasmine incense. The fog that had lingered for days lifted just enough to reveal more of Ban Ko than she'd ever seen. But nothing about that clarity felt safe. In fact, it was worse, because now she saw them, the villagers. Dressed in black and red, with ash smeared across their foreheads in jagged streaks. They moved slowly, deliberately, as though following steps rehearsed for generations. No one spoke, no one smiled. They didn't need to. The silence said enough. Lin stood on the house's stone steps and watched. The old men painted doorways in crushed charcoal and goat's blood. The women strung white bone charms from the trees, small ones, bird bones maybe, but some were longer, thicker, human. Lanterns were lit before sunset, red paper, bone-white candles. The wax dripped like fat from old skin. The smell of pig's blood wafted through the air, mixed with star anise, burnt lemongrass, and something darker, something metallic. Lin didn't have to ask.
She knew what it was. The bone feast had returned, and she was its centerpiece. The old woman arrived before dusk. She carried no lantern this time, only a bundle wrapped in crimson silk. She placed it gently on her altar without a word. Lin stared at it, afraid to touch it, but she didn't have to. The silk unwrapped itself. Inside, a dress, white, long-sleeved, embroidered with silver thread, and at the neckline, a loop, a space for the silver cord to rest proudly. Lin didn't need a mirror to know it would fit her perfectly. She whispered, hoarse, "Why now?" The woman answered without looking at her, "Because you turned 18 yesterday." They dressed her that night. 4 village women entered her house without knocking, not hostile, not kind, like undertakers preparing a body that wasn't dead yet. They bathed her with water scented in lotus and ash, rubbed her skin with salt and dried orange peel, braided her hair with red string. They didn't speak, not to her, not to each other. When the dress slipped over her shoulders, Lin felt the weight of it immediately. Not physical, not fabric, something heavier. Like the dress had memory, like it remembered every girl who had worn it before her, and every scream they hadn't been allowed to make. At midnight, the drums began. Low, hollow, one beat every few seconds, the rhythm of a dying heart. The villagers formed a procession outside, walking in slow circles around the square. Each carried a candle, each held a bone. They chanted, but not in words Lin understood, not in any human language. The sound crawled under her skin, pressed against her chest like wet cloth. She was guided to the center of the village, barefoot, eyes lined with coal and soot, silver cord shining like a chain in moonlight. They didn't bind her hands. They didn't need to. The cord had already done it. At the center of the square stood a tall wooden structure, like a wedding altar made of aged bamboo and bleached branches. Beneath it, a raised stone slab covered in red cloth. The cloth moved slightly in the wind. Or maybe not wind. Maybe breath. They placed Lin on the stone, not harshly, gently, reverently, like a relic where it belongs. Then the old priest stepped forward. She had never seen him before, thin, bare-chested, tattoos of bones curled across his skin like vines, his mouth sewn shut with black thread, his eyes white. But somehow, he saw her. He reached into a clay bowl and pulled ash, smeared it across her forehead in 3 lines, 1 vertical, 2 diagonal. Then he pressed his fingers to the silver cord and whispered in a voice that did not use a mouth, "She remembers." The villagers fell silent. The air grew still. And then, beneath the stone slab, came a sound Lin would never forget. A sigh, not from a person, from the earth. A long, drawn-out breath that smelled of rot, salt, and old rain. The slab shook slightly beneath her. The red cloth twitched again, and from the corners of her eyes, Lin saw something rise from the soil. Fingers, dozens of them, bone white, not reaching to grab, but to welcome, to guide. Lin's body began to go numb, from her toes upward. She couldn't move, could barely think, but she could feel something stir inside her chest, a memory of her mother's voice begging her father, "She's just a child." and his trembling. It's her or the rain. Another memory of being held above the well, of voices chanting, of her own tiny fingers clawing at the silver cord, and a voice, older than language, whispering, "Come back to me." Suddenly, her throat burned, the silver cord pulsed, and without warning, Lynn screamed, a sound so raw, so loud, so human, it cracked the silence like lightning through bone. The villagers recoiled, the priest stumbled backward, the lanterns blew out, darkness fell, and from beneath the stone slab came the loudest sound of all, a crack, like something beneath had awakened too soon. Lynn sat up, panting. The cord hung loose. The ash smeared across her brow was wet. It was bleeding. The slab split down the center. A gust of wind or breath shot up from the earth, sending dust and petals and broken talismans spiraling into the night. And a voice rose from the crack, not hers, not the villagers', the voice of the girl beneath. "Tiel, you promised me silence." Another voice joined. "You gave me voice instead." Then 100 voices, then 1,000 voices, all of them her own, all of them crying out. And Lynn realized she had broken the pact. She ran, through the crowd, through the fog, through the bones that fell like rain from the trees. The villagers didn't follow. They stood frozen, their mouths sewn shut by fear or by something older. The altar behind her burned, without flame, only ash rising, only silence left behind. But not peace. Something had risen, and it was coming for her. Back at the house, the trap door was open. The journals were gone, but the mirror on the wall had changed. It didn't show her face. It showed hers. The girl, drenched, floating, smiling. And behind her, a village, underwater, its rooftops drowning in silence.
The rain came that night, not gentle, not cleansing. It fell like punishment, sharp, cold, red-tinted. Lynn sat curled beneath the altar, soaked to the bone, her white ritual dress now gray with ash and mud. The silver cord hung limp against her chest, no longer glowing, no longer tight, but not gone, never gone. Outside, the bone feast lay in ruin, lanterns extinguished, the altar broken, the stone slab cracked in two, and the villagers gone, as if they had never been there at all. The whispers had stopped, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was too still, too obedient, like a breath held before something breaks, like the house itself was waiting, not for her screams, not for her blood, for something else, for a name. She found the scroll at dawn, not one of the old ones, a new one, tucked beneath the floorboards, sealed in black wax, smaller than the others, almost overlooked. But when her fingers brushed it, she felt something hot coil up her arm, like static, like memory. She broke the seal and read words written in a language she didn't know, yet somehow understood. The binding of the Taoist Yun Mak, as recorded in the year of rainless moons. I climbed the mountain not to find God, but to seal a ghost.
The villagers begged me to help them. Their soil cracked, their animals screamed, their children died with dry tongues. They had already summoned her by then. They had already thrown the girl into the well, but it was not enough. The spirit they called, she was not a god of water. She was something older, a bone eater, a listener in the deep. I bound her with what she craved, voice, marrow, memory. But bindings do not last forever, especially when they are made with borrowed blood. Lin stared at the final line, heart pounding. Borrowed blood, the Chow bloodline, her blood. She turned the scroll over. A symbol was carved into the back, a spiraling knot within a circle, broken in one place. A binding seal, fractured. She didn't know how she knew that, but she did. And then the realization sank in. The Taoist hadn't banished the spirit. He had trapped it, bound it inside the well, inside the bones, inside the bloodline. And every 27 years, when the seal weakened, a new Chow daughter had to be sacrificed, not to satisfy the spirit, but to rebind it. They weren't feeding a monster. They were resealing it. Again and again and again. But Lin hadn't gone through with the ritual. She had screamed, and in doing so, she had broken the cycle. She had set it free. The house groaned. A wind howled through the windows, though they were shut. The candles relit themselves, blue flames flickering wildly. And then came the scratching, from the walls, from the ceiling, from beneath. She ran to the mirror. It had changed again. This time it showed the Taoist, young, bald, eyes ringed with exhaustion. He stood before the altar, holding a brush dipped in blood, chanting in a tongue not meant for this world. Around him, bones. So many bones. And a girl lying still, hair black, cord silver, eyes open, unblinking. She touched the glass. Her breath fogged it. Words appeared in the condensation. She is not spirit. She is memory. And memory cannot be killed, only contained. She stumbled backward. The house shuddered. The trapdoor burst open on its own, and from the depths came a song, not melody, a chant, a ritual. But it wasn't the villagers chanting this time. It was the girls, all of them. Every voice lost beneath the well, every girl who had vanished before her. Their voices rose in unison. Bind her again, seal the wound, give her form, give her name. Lin dropped to her knees. She couldn't breathe. The cord tightened again, slow, pulsing. But this time she welcomed it, not as a chain, but as a reminder. She was the last one, or she would be. She descended the well one final time. The stone was slick, the carvings glowed faintly, pulsing with ancient breath. At the bottom, the pool was still, but the water shimmered, disturbed from below. She stood at the edge, raised her voice, and spoke. I am the one who remembers. The surface rippled. I am the voice that returned. The water darkened. I am not yours to silence. Then she said the name she had not dared speak, not out loud, not even in thought. Tio. and the water exploded. From the center rose the girl, not just bone, not just spirit, whole, hair soaked, face pale, eyes white. She opened her mouth, and Lin saw her own voice emerge, her childhood laugh, her teenage scream, her mother's lullaby, all of it, stolen, echoed, returned. The girl reached for her, but this time Lin reached back, took her hand, and whispered, "It ends with me." The seal reformed around them, the spiral circle, the Taoist's glyph, but this time it pulsed with new light, not blood, not silence, but truth. Lin stepped into the water, held Till close, and spoke the words from the Taoist scroll, as if she'd always known them. Voice to marrow, memory to chain, cord to root, bind, bind, bind. The water surged upward, wrapped around them both like silk, and just before everything went dark, Lin heard one final whisper in her ear. "Thank you for remembering me." When she awoke, she was alone. The pool was still. The bones were gone. The journals were gone. The cord was gone. But the silence remained. Only this time, it was peaceful. She climbed out of the well one final time, walked through the house, out the front door, into the sunlight, the first true sunlight she had seen since arriving. Ban Ko was empty, every door open, every lantern extinguished. And in the center of the square, where the stone slab had once stood, now grew a single white lotus, blooming, whole.
She thought it was over. For one beautiful moment, Lin believed the village had exhaled its curse, that she had paid the final debt, that the chain of memory had been sealed shut like the mouth of the well. She should have known better. Ban Ko does not forget so easily. It began with a whisper, soft, almost tender. She was folding her mother's old blanket, preparing to leave, when it slipped between her ribs like a breath. "Don't leave me again." Lin froze. The house was empty, the trapdoor sealed, the altar quiet, but something had shifted in the air, barely perceptible but undeniably there. A new kind of silence. Not absence, expectation. Later that night, as she packed her bag beneath the flickering lantern, she noticed it. The mirror. It had cracked, not shattered, just one clean fracture down the center. And behind her reflection, in the dimness, a shadow. The girl again. To you. But older. Aged by grief. Her dress no longer white, but deep crimson. Her eyes not clouded now, but sharp, glowing, watching, waiting. Lin reached for the mirror, touched the glass. Her reflection blinked, but she hadn't. She tore her hand away and stumbled back. The crack down the center widened just slightly, and for the briefest moment, the silver cord, which had vanished after the binding, returned, wrapped around her throat. Not tight, not painful, but there, a promise, a warning, a memory that would not stay buried. She rushed to the altar, flinging open the bottom drawer where the scroll had burned. But there was nothing left. No parchment, no glyphs, only dust. And something else. A single tooth, small, filed flat, wrapped in thread, still warm. That night, she dreamed again, not of water, not of bones, of herself, sitting beneath the altar, hands bloody, thread in her teeth, sewing her own mouth shut, one stitch at a time, eyes wide open, watching the door, waiting for footsteps. She woke to find blood beneath her fingernails, not dry, fresh. Her lips were fine, but her tongue tasted like iron. The house was no longer still. Now it creaked even when she didn't move. The wind knocked at the shutters like fists, and the floorboards vibrated with a rhythm too slow to be natural. A pulse, a heartbeat, the heartbeat of something remembering itself. She fled the house, ran through the village. Every door she passed was open, every room inside empty. Yet candles still burned, food still steamed. It was as though the villagers had vanished mid-step. No signs of violence, only absence. And that silence again. Not natural, not peaceful, not dead. Held, as if the village was waiting for her to return. In the temple, she found the old woman, kneeling before the altar, eyes closed, chanting. But the sound came from her chest, not her mouth. A low, guttural vibration, like someone trying to scream with their lungs alone. Lin reached out. The woman opened her eyes and began to weep. But the tears didn't fall from her eyes. They dripped from her mouth, thick, black, sticky. Her lips moved silently. Then her hand lifted, trembling, and she pointed to Lin's throat. Her mouth finally formed a single word. Bind. Then she collapsed. Lin rushed forward, but the woman wasn't breathing. And as she knelt beside her, something inside Lin's chest twisted. A heat, a pull. And then, the cord tightened. No warning, no pressure, just sudden, breath-stealing grip. She fell back, clawing at her throat, but there was nothing to grab. No thread, no rope, just the sensation of being choked from the inside. A whisper rose behind her ear. "You're unsailing me." She stumbled back to the house, lungs on fire. Her skin burned with fever. Every reflection now showed something different. Not her face, not her eyes, but versions of her. Girls in dresses, girls in graves, girls with stitches, girls with cords, all blinking in rhythm, all whispering in silence. She tried to light incense at the altar. It would not burn. The flame refused to hold. The smoke twisted the wrong way, downward, back into the trap door, back to the well, back to her. Lin screamed this time, not in fear, in rage. "I did everything you wanted," she choked. "I remembered. I gave you a name. I spoke the silence." The house groaned. The mirror cracked again. And the voice, hers but not, answered, "You remembered too much." She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. And there, in the candlelight, her eyes fell on the old photograph, the one from the very beginning. Her parents, her as a child, in front of the altar. But now a new figure stood in the background. A girl in red, eyes black, mouth open, no sound, only shadow. And around her neck, the same silver cord. Only this time, it was cut. The last memory came then, not in a dream, but fully awake. She was 5, standing before the altar, screaming, the cord pulling tight, her mother crying, her father whispering apologies. And then a blade, small, sharp, cutting the cord, not killing her, severing the pact. Just once, just long enough to let her live, just long enough to delay the inevitable. Now it was catching up. The cord had regrown. The cycle had remembered. The spirit, to you, was no longer waiting to be sealed. She wanted more.
not silence, not sacrifice. A body. Lin crawled to the altar, pulled open the trap door. The stone glowed below, the water shimmered like a mirror, and in it the girl stood waiting, hair down, eyes calm, hands held open like a mother welcoming a child, and around her neck the same silver cord. Only this time it was cut. Lin looked down. Her own cord was now visible again, glowing softly, woven not of thread, but memories. And she understood. To end it, she couldn't just bind the spirit, she had to replace it. Memory must live somewhere, if not in the well, then in the one who enters it. The cord pulsed again, but this time it didn't choke. It guided. And Lin, trembling, whispered one final word. Come. The girl smiled, and slowly, the cord between them grew taut. Two ends, one thread, drawing them together.
There is a kind of silence that doesn't soothe. A silence that doesn't come from stillness, but from debt. It settles not over land, but within blood, passed down, inherited. Not as a gift, as a warning. And Lin had finally begun to understand what she'd been given. She hadn't survived by accident. She had inherited the silence, and now it was time to return it. The night was moonless, no stars, only clouds heavy with unshed rain, hanging low like curtains veiling a funeral. Lin sat at the altar in her mother's dress. Not the ritual gown, just an old red aoyai, faded and mended at the seams. It smelled like burnt jasmine and lemon balm, like comfort, like home. She hadn't touched it in years, not since she'd left Hanoi for college, not since her mother had packed it carefully into a box, whispering, "You'll need this again someday." At the time, she thought she meant for Tet. Now she knew better. Her mother had always known this day would come. She lit 3 sticks of incense. This time, they burned clean. No reversal of smoke, no hidden meaning, just smoke that drifted upward and curled around the photo frames on the altar, faces that once smiled, now faded with age. She reached beneath the mat and retrieved the last thing she'd buried there, a sealed envelope. The lawyer had given it to her, along with the deed. She hadn't opened it, not until now. Her name was written on the front in her father's hand. Just her name. Not Kongai, not Beiyu, not even Ling. Just Zhu Ling. Her full name, the name bound to the pact. She opened it. Inside, a letter and a photograph. The photo first, a grainy black and white shot. Her parents, young, barely older than she was now, standing in front of the altar in Banko. In her mother's arms, an infant, eyes closed, head wrapped in silver cloth. The cord, visible even then, wrapped around her neck like a birthright. She read the letter next. My dearest Ling, if you are reading this, we have failed to keep the silence from finding you. We tried, Khan. We tried so hard. We were not supposed to have you. The elders warned us, if she is born, she belongs to the well. But your mother begged. We made a choice. We ran. We broke the pact. And for a while, we believed we had escaped it. But silence is not something you can outrun. It waits. It waited 18 years. Forgive us. We severed the cord when you were 5. You almost survived. But in doing so, We delayed the cycle. We didn't stop it. You were always meant to return. We raised you to forget, but your blood was always remembering. If you find this letter, then you already know the only way forward is not to break the silence, but to become its keeper. She doesn't want a sacrifice, Ling. She wants a witness. You are the last voice. Whatever you do next, do it with love. Jumta mai ben kon. We are always with you. Ba and May. Lin folded the letter. Her hands didn't shake. There were no tears. Not anymore. Only understanding. She wasn't meant to die. She was meant to carry, not a curse, a memory. Outside, the village stirred, not with movement, but with sound, the kind you feel in your teeth before your ears. The well was calling again, but this time it wasn't asking for blood. It was asking for presence. Lin walked through the empty square, past the houses that once held families, past the altar now cracked and overgrown with moss. She wore no ceremonial robe, no silver cord, only her mother's aoyai and the truth. At the edge of the house, the trapdoor stood open, not yawning, not threatening, just waiting. She stepped down slowly. The spiral stones no longer glowed. They were warm, welcoming, familiar. The chamber below was different now. No bones, no water, just earth, soft and dark. And in its center, a mirror, framed in ash wood. The surface rippled as she approached. She looked into it and saw herself. Not older, not younger, just whole. Behind her reflection stood the girl, Fio, still and quiet, but no longer angry. Her hands were open, her mouth stitched shut, not in pain, in peace. The final ritual was not about offering. It was about acceptance. Lin whispered into the darkness, "I will remember." The mirror pulsed, the ground shimmered, and the girl's stitches fell away, thread by thread. Her mouth opened, and from it flowed names. Not screams, not curses, just names. All the daughters, all the voices, all the girls who had been forgotten. Lin sat on the earth, closed her eyes, let the voices pass through her like wind through trees. One by one they entered her chest, nested behind her ribs. Not heavy, warm. She was no longer the sacrifice. She was the storyteller. Hours passed, maybe days. She did not sleep, she did not eat. She listened, until finally the last voice spoke. It was her own, but younger, innocent, afraid. "Will I disappear?" Lin answered softly, "No, you'll be remembered." When she opened her eyes, the mirror was gone. The chamber was empty, and the silence had changed again. Not expectant, not cursed, just still, just sacred. She returned to the surface. The village was silent, but this time it was peaceful. The wind rustled the trees, a bird sang.
The fog had lifted, and the path down the mountain was clear. She locked the door behind her, not to keep anything in, not to seal anything away, but as a gesture of respect to those who had waited and those who had been heard. As she walked down the road, she whispered the names, one by one. The wind carried them, and Ban Ko, for the first time in generations, did not answer back.
The road out of Ban Ko was longer than Ling remembered, or perhaps it only felt that way because she was walking forward with something that didn't belong to her alone. Her footsteps echoed differently now, not as someone returning to the world, but as someone between worlds. She had inherited more than silence. She had inherited memory, and memory, once spoken, does not fade. The mountain mist rose in swirls behind her. The village had disappeared again, back into the trees, the fog, the place that maps refused to name. But Ling could still feel it, a hum at the base of her skull, a thread brushing the inside of her chest, and somewhere inside her, a voice, not whispering, just breathing. Tihou. That night, Ling found an old guest house on the outskirts of Lao Kai. The owner, a woman in her 60s, gave her a room without question. When Ling signed the logbook, the woman frowned at her name. "Cho Ling?" she repeated, lips thin. Ling nodded. The woman stared for a moment, then said, almost too softly, "It's always the daughters," and walked away. In the room, Ling sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed. She should have been tired, but her body didn't ache, her mind didn't race. She was quiet, not numb, settled, until she turned toward the mirror by the window and saw the reflection was not hers. The girl, still, beautiful, dressed in red silk this time, not white, hair pinned with silver combs, a flower tucked behind one ear, a bride. Ling rose slowly, approached the glass. The girl watched her, head tilted, not threatening, not pleading, simply waiting. Ling whispered, "Who are you now?" The girl blinked, and then the reflection shifted to a wedding, an old one, rural, surrounded by villagers in red and black. A bride walked in silence down a narrow path, barefoot, her dress dragging through ash. At the altar, no groom, only a small black urn, and beside it, a shallow bowl of water. Ling watched as the bride knelt, dipped her hands in the bowl, cut her finger with a hairpin, and smeared her blood across the urn. "I take you in silence. I bind you without witness. I marry what cannot die." The image rippled, returned to the girl's face, but now her eyes were wet, her lips parted, and Ling finally understood. You weren't just a sacrifice. You were promised. Ghost marriage. The old stories came rushing back, unspoken traditions, families marrying their daughters to the dead to settle debts, to appease ancestors, to honor unfulfilled contracts. And if the groom was not truly dead, even worse, because then the bride belonged not to the spirit world nor the living, but to something in between. Tiao had not been offered to the well as a sacrifice. She had been given as a wife, a bride to a mountain god, or something far less holy. She could see it now, the way the well had whispered to her with familiarity, the way the cord had never truly fought her, but tugged, guided, not to death, but to union. She wasn't just the last daughter. She was the reincarnation of the bride. The well hadn't wanted her blood. It wanted its wife back. The mirror flickered again. This time it showed Ling, wearing the same red dress, eyes closed, hands clasped in prayer. A silver cord wrapped not around her neck, but on her finger, like a ring. She stumbled back. The mirror cracked, not from pressure, from within. A spiderweb fracture bloomed across the glass, and then silence. Not her own, theirs. Thousands of voices suddenly cut off, like a church whose bells had stopped mid-toll. And she felt it, the presence returning. She turned to the window. Outside, the mist had crept down the mountain, thicker now, moving with intent, and in it, figures, dressed in red. Girls, each one veiled, each one holding incense, walking in a line toward her, toward the house, toward the mirror, and at the end of the line, the groom, faceless, tall, wrapped in black and gold silk, eyes glowing beneath the veil. She screamed, but no sound came, only a ringing in her ears. The cord wrapped itself once more around her throat, not choking, just reminding. You were promised. You wore the dress once. You said the vow. She dropped to her knees, gasping, not from fear, but from the weight of memory. And in the reflection of the cracked mirror, she saw the wedding again. This time she was walking, voluntarily, step by step toward the altar, a red lantern overhead, drums behind her, and in her hands, a scroll. Not of silence, a marriage contract, signed in her own blood. She touched the mirror's edge. The fracture glowed. A whisper passed through. You broke the seal. You silenced the well. But the bond is still yours. The old woman knocked at the door. No voice, just 3 taps. Ling opened it slowly. The woman held out a box. Inside, a wedding veil, red, hand-stitched, smelling of burnt myrrh and thyme. It belongs to you, she whispered. He's still waiting. Ling shook her head. No. Her voice was a breath. I won't belong to him. But the woman's eyes filled with something ancient, not pity, not fear, understanding. Then choose another way, she said. Write your own ending, but do it soon. The mountain walks tonight. That night, Ling sat in the center of the room. She didn't wear the veil. She didn't light the incense. She didn't chant. Instead, she opened her mouth and told the story. Every name, every girl, every broken vow, every memory, she spoke. Not to the spirit, not to the village, but to herself. Because that was the truth no one ever told. The bride was not bound by death. She was bound by silence, and silence can be broken. Outside, the footsteps faded. The mist curled back into the trees. The fog extinguished itself. And in the mirror, her reflection stood alone. No red dress, no cord, only her. Ling. Unbound, unpromised, unclaimed.
The journey back to Bangkok was not a decision. It was a pull, like a tide, like gravity, the kind of movement that doesn't begin with the feet, but with memory. Ling walked the winding path through the mountain fog, not as a girl returning, but as something summoned, not by name, but by silence, calling her home. The mist thickened the closer she came. Trees leaned in. Stones whispered. The birds did not sing. And when the first rooftops came into view, half submerged in cloud, Ling knew it had begun.
The village looked wrong. Not abandoned, not alive, just suspended, as if the world had pressed pause. Clothes still hung from lines, dishes still sat in basins, but no one moved, no one breathed. Ling stepped through the square, each footfall echoed. There were no ashes on the wind this time, only the smell of wet soil and rust. She returned to the house. The front door stood open, a quiet invitation. Inside, everything was as she left it, yet not. The walls had darkened, the wood swollen with damp, and at the center of the altar, the silver nails had begun to rise, not removed, loosened, pulled upward by invisible hands, each one quivering, each one trembling with tension, as though the earth below was trying to breathe again. Ling stepped closer. The trapdoor groaned beneath the altar, its seal, once tight, now cracked like dry bone. The talismans had turned black, the symbols burned. One nail wrenched free with a sharp metallic cry and dropped to the floor. A whisper followed. 1. Another nail twisted. 2. A third. 3. Ling fell to her knees. She reached forward, not to remove them, but to drive them back. But the wood burned her palms. The altar rejected her touch. The house began to shake, and from the floor beneath her the sound rose. Not whispers, not voices, breathing, slow, wet, too deep to be human. She crawled back, choking on the heat radiating from below. The mirror on the wall cracked again. She turned toward it and froze. The mirror didn't reflect her. It reflected the well, open now, filled not with water, but with eyes, dozens, hundreds, all staring up, all blinking in unison. The girls, the brides, the sacrificed, the remembered, and in the center of them, the groom. A shape, no face, just shadow wrapped in ceremonial silk, taller than the well, head bowed, hands clawed and long, waiting, not reaching, just watching. The final nail screeched free. It clattered across the altar and spun in a perfect circle, then stopped, pointing to Ling. The altar split. The trapdoor burst open. Smoke poured upward, white, not black, cold, not hot, the scent of rain on bone. And from the depths a voice rose, one Ling had never heard before, but had always known. Come down and remember. She stood, no resistance, no fear, only the weight of all the girls before her. She descended the spiral for the last time, each step lit with a blue flame, each stone bearing a name, not engraved, carved from bone. The well chamber had changed again. No water, no bones, only a massive circle drawn in ash. At its center, a throne made of teeth, and sitting upon it, him, the groom, or the thing they called groom, eyes glowing like coals, a face that was only suggestion, flickering, blurred, and beside him, Tiu,
Not as a girl, not as a spirit, as a bride. Beautiful, silent, tears streaming down her cheeks. She turned to Ling, held out her hand, and Ling understood. The binding was never about sealing the spirit. It was about completing the ceremony. The pact had been paused for decades. Because she had escaped it once, the cycle had waited for her to return, not as sacrifice, but as the final vow. Ling stepped inside the circle. The ash lifted, swirling in the air like moths. The groom rose, the ground trembled, and in the silence that followed, Ling spoke, her voice steady, clear. I am not yours. The groom paused. I am not what was promised. The air crackled. Tiu lowered her hand, her eyes, so full of sadness, closed. Ling knelt beside her, touched her face. You never said no. Tiu's lips parted. A single word. Bind me. The ground screamed. The altar above shattered. The house collapsed, and the spiral burst into light. Ling stood in the center, raised her hands, and repeated the words she had once read in blood. Voice to marrow, memory to chain, cord to root. Bind, bind, bind. The groom lunged, the well howled, and Tiu smiled. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around Ling, and whispered, I give you back your voice. Light flooded the chamber. The nails, all 27, fell from above like iron rain. Each one landed with a finality that could be heard in the bones of the mountain. The ash turned to salt, the groom dissolved, and the well slept for the first time, truly. When Ling opened her eyes, the chamber was empty. No throne, no bride, no blood. Only stillness, and in her hand, the silver cord, frayed at both ends, unknotted. She walked back up the spiral as the sun broke the horizon. The village remained silent, but not heavy. The air was lighter. Birds had returned. Trees no longer leaned. And on the altar, though shattered, sat a single nail, embedded not in wood, but in stone. A seal, unmovable, eternal. Ling walked to the edge of the village one last time. She looked back only once and smiled, not because it was over, but because it was finally hers. The silence, the memory, the story, no longer bound, only remembered.
The night began like all the others, with silence, but not the kind Lin had learned to fear. This silence was calm, like the earth had finished telling a story it had held in its lungs for centuries. Still, the air was thick with waiting, because not every story ends in forgetting. Some must be seen, some must be witnessed, and some, like this one, must be rewritten while still bleeding. The villagers returned at dusk, one by one, faces pale but no longer blank, eyes red, not from ritual, but from waking, from remembering. They carried no drums, no incense, no red silk, only candles, each held in both hands, flame trembling. They gathered around the square in complete quiet, not because they were silenced, because they were listening. To her, to Lin. She stood at the center of the square beneath the full moon. No silver cord, no dress of the dead, just the clothes she had arrived in. Dusty jeans, a cotton shirt, shoes caked in salt, and around her neck a red thread, thin, simple, untied, floating in the breeze like a whisper no longer afraid of being heard. In her hands, Lin held the final offering, a scroll she had written by hand the night before, not in blood, in ink, not on rice paper, on bark peeled from the tree behind the well, not with magic, but with truth. She began to speak, soft at first, but each word grew, carried by wind, echoed by firelight. This village was built on a pact made in hunger, in desperation, in fear. You gave a girl to the well, not because she was powerful, but because she listened. You married her to silence, and when she screamed, you buried the sound. You called it tradition. You called it mercy. But it was memory, and memory never stays buried. The villagers did not move. Some wept, some knelt, some closed their eyes and whispered names. Lin continued. This village was never cursed. It was wounded, and no one dared to bind the wound, only to cover it. So tonight I offer no blood. I offer no silence. I offer a name. She unrolled the scroll. At the very top, written in large brush strokes, Tiu, a name spoken aloud, once forbidden, now freed. As the villagers watched, Lin approached the well. Not the altar, not the trap door, the true well, the one at the edge of the village, once dry, now full, but not of water, of reflections. When she looked into it, she did not see herself. She saw every girl who had come before, standing around her, watching her. Some smiled, some cried. One held a comb, another a piece of red silk, but none reached out, none whispered. They didn't have to. They were free. Lin dropped the scroll into the well. It did not sink. It floated, unburned. The moon reflected in its ink, and when it finally disappeared beneath the surface, the well glowed, just once, like an ember sighing out its final breath. Then came the sound, not a scream, not a growl, but a soft crack, like bone breaking in reverse, the sound of something being mended. The wind shifted, and from the ground, small white fragments rose like fireflies. Bones, but not whole, shattered pieces, floating upward, upward, upward toward the sky. And with them, ash, red threads, pages from old journals long burned, comb teeth, wedding veil lace, bits of girls forgotten, now gathered. They did not return to the earth. They did not fall. They vanished, lifted into the air until they were no more. And when the last one disappeared, the wind stopped, the well stilled, and the village exhaled. The villagers bowed their heads, not in fear, in reverence. They lit their candles and placed them around the square, one by one, a circle of firelight, a funeral pyre without flame, a wedding with no groom, a feast with no death. Then came the smoke, not from fire, from the ground. It rose in spirals from beneath their feet, from the cracks between the stones, from beneath the houses, from the well. It was gray, scented with myrrh and milk and something older. It wrapped around their legs. It filled their lungs, but it did not choke. It healed. The smoke was memory leaving the body, a final breath, a last rite. Lin walked through the mist, eyes closed. She whispered the names, again and again, and with each name a candle went out, until the square was dark, empty, and silent. But this silence was not hollow. It was earned. It was peace. She returned to her house, or what was left of it. The roof had caved in, the altar cracked, but beneath the rubble something shimmered. A box, unopened, tied with a ribbon the color of dried blood. She knelt and lifted it. Inside, a comb, a piece of thread, a journal, and a photograph of her as a child, smiling. No cord, no fear, just joy. She smiled back and wept for the first time, not for the girls, not for herself, for the village, for the years lost to silence, for the nights wasted on fear, for the voices never heard. And then she wrote, with pen, with ink, with a voice that was finally hers. The night Ban Ko remembered, the bones turned to smoke, the girls became sky, and silence became a story worth telling.
There are stories that end with silence, but not this one. This one ends with a door, partly open, and something waiting beneath. Weeks passed. The mist in Ban Ko thinned. The soil softened. The birds returned. But the well remained, quiet, whole, but never empty. Lin stayed, not because she had to, because she chose to. The village no longer feared her. Children waved when she walked the paths. The old woman who once called her daughter of debt now left warm rice at her doorstep without a word. The fear was gone, but the weight remained. Not heavy, just there. Like the final chapter of a book that refuses to close. Lin tended to the altar, though it no longer whispered. She swept the steps each morning, lit incense not out of fear, but of grace. She wrote every day, pages upon pages, not to bind, not to break, but to remember. She built a shelf where the trap door once was, and on it she placed the names. Every girl, every cycle, every silence. Not with dates, with words, with stories, so they would never be lost again. One morning she woke to find something strange. A nail, silver, thin, curled slightly at the tip, lying beside her pillow. No blood, no scratch, just presence. She held it in her hand for a long time, and when she finally placed it on the altar, it glowed briefly, then turned to ash. Later that night, the dreams returned. Not the ones of drowning, not the ones of bone. A new dream. She stood at the edge of the well, looking down. There was no water, only a long stone staircase winding into darkness. She heard her own footsteps echo below, but she had not moved. Someone else was descending, wearing her face, wearing her smile, but with eyes that did not blink. She woke to find the trap door sealed, but the floor beneath it warm, and from the corner of the room, a voice. "You know I'm still here. Not to you, not the groom. Something older, something beneath them both. The original hunger, the mouth that had learned to speak by tasting memory. The spirit the Taoist had once bound with marrow and ink. The first silence." Lin sat before the altar, not afraid, not surprised. "I know," she whispered. The room darkened slightly, not from shadow, but from breath. "You gave them peace, but not me." "I didn't forget you," she said. The voice paused. "Then why did you seal the door?" Lin looked at the altar, at the shelf of names, at the ashes, then said quietly, "Because peace isn't for you." A silence, then laughter. Low, not cruel, but just knowing. "Then what is?" Lin stood, walked to the center of the room, knelt and touched the wood. Warm again, alive. She closed her eyes and whispered, "A witness." The floor pulsed, a slow heartbeat, one she'd felt since the day she arrived. But now it didn't threaten her. It simply asked, "Will you carry me too?" She thought of the girl in the red dress, the brides, the journals, the mirror, the breath of generations that had passed through her. And then she whispered, "No. You are not meant to be carried. You are meant to be known." And with those words, the heartbeat faded, not into silence, but into stillness. The kind that follows a story when it's been fully told. The kind that doesn't wait for a sequel. Just a pause. Just a page turned. Lin left the house the next day. She didn't lock the door. She didn't carry a bag. Only a notebook. Empty. Its first page blank. Waiting. Not for the past, for the next voice. She walked down the path, past the well. She didn't look in. She didn't need to, because what waited below no longer waited for her. It waited for the right one, the next girl, the next name. And when she came, she would not find fear. She would find a story, a shelf, a witness, a thread no longer wrapped around her neck, but sewn through pages. That night in the village square, a breeze lifted a single sheet of paper from Lin's old room. It floated, curled, and landed beside the well. Written on it, "Memory is not a curse. It's a doorway, and I have walked through it."